world that is being used as a replacement for animal therapy in nursing homes, which is really kind of awesome.
So she builds planets on Earth, you guys.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our very special program, The Millennials Aren't All Right, Gen Y and COVID-19. I'm James Monroe. I'm the producer of adult programs at the Museum of Science, Boston. And I'm so excited to be here tonight. We have an incredible lineup and panel of millennial voices who are here to share about their experiences over the past year living in COVID-19 and the pandemic. And I'm so thankful for all of them for being here and agreeing to share their stories. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. And this evening is a part of our current virtual winter-spring season of adult programming here at the museum. We're about halfway through our lineup, still some fantastic events and experiences to come. And every week now through the end of May, we will be here with a free virtual event. So I encourage you to check out that full lineup and register for your spot in each of those by going to our website at mos.org/adults and come back and spend your winter spring season with us here at the museum. Now, the way that tonight is going to work, we're going to start the first half of the program. We will introduce you to our millennials. We've spent the past couple of weeks filming different intro reels so that you can hear their stories firsthand. And then the second half of the night, they will be here live with me on the stream for a group conversation. And a part of that conversation will be questions from all of you. So if you have a question for our panel, you can submit those at any time by going to slido.com and entering the code millennials, just as it appears on your screen right now. Once again, that's Slido, SLIDO.com, with the code millennials. And we'll try and get through a bunch of those a little bit later on. Now, I need to thank our friends at the Lowell Institute for their continued support of the adult programming. Without them, we would not be here tonight. This event would not be happening, and it would not be free for all of you. So please join me in giving a virtual round of applause and thanks to our friends at the Lowell Institute. And finally, after the conversation tonight, I ask all of you to go to donate.mos.org/MOS at home and consider making a gift to allow us to keep bringing free virtual STEM programming just like tonight into all of your homes. Once again, that's donate.mos.org/MOS at home. But now we're going to jump right in and get these introductions started. Our first millennial panelist for tonight is Dominique Kix, the Associate Director of Annual Giving and Special Events at the YW Boston. She is a millennial and fundraising professional with an interest in helping to activate millennials as changemakers through philanthropy and DEI practice in the fundraising space. Please meet Dominique Kix.
Hey y'all, I'm Dominique Kix. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am 28 years old. I am a Boston native. Very important to me that you guys know that I'm a Boston native. I am the Associate Director at YW Boston. I'm the Associate Director of Annual Giving and Special Events. While we are still focusing on our habitual donors, thinking through strategies as new donors come in so that they become some of our habitual donors. Back in January of 2020, I was really excited because I had come onto the YW team in the previous summer. So I hadn't had a full year at the YW yet. And so I was really excited to go into the new year and have a full event cycle. And I was really excited because we had a full team and we had lots of new events that were happening and we were really gearing up for things that were going to happen throughout the year with our different programs. And then COVID hit. I remember when COVID first struck because we were all really like, well, what are we going to do? Because we had a lot of in-person events happening in that week. So the week that we all went remote, we had 2 in-person events scheduled. We were really just like, so what does this mean for these 2 events? And that was the immediate focus because we were like, it's not going to last long. We were the optimists. We were like everyone else. And we're like, it's going to be like 2 weeks. It's going to be like 3 weeks and we'll be back. And so we were really just like, so do we call this event? Do we not call this event? We ended up having to cancel our alumni event. And if I'm remembering correctly, we had to cancel the the program day as well. In terms of how we pivoted in our goals, now that we're a year into this, now that we're moving into a virtual world, everything's a little different. Where we were an organization that really relied on in-person interactions with our donors, and that was what like really drove our fundraising. We are now having to shift so that we are doing more of that virtual connection and virtual nourishing of relationships. I spend a lot of time on Zoom talking to my donors or talking to my team and talking through who needs to be contacted and who needs to be updated on what's going on. When you're talking to a computer screen, there's a little bit more work that goes into building these relationships and making sure that people know that you care and that you're there and that your work is still continuing to thrive through all of this. Yeah, in terms of fundraising, it's really kind of a mix, because you'll see organizations that are tending to the urgent needs, and they are seeing lots of donations and they're seeing lots of in-kind gifts, and they're getting lots of attention. There is this sense of competition now, because there's this, oh well, only the urgent need, only the organizations who are focused on this urgent need that right now are getting the attention of our donors. I think one of the things that has come out of this era of COVID, because at this point it's an era, that I think that a lot of organizations are starting to think through how to be more inclusive around fundraising. A lot of organizations are starting to think through how can they engage people intergenerationally. So how are we going to bring millennials into the conversation? How are we going to have them engaging with the boomers? How are we going to have them engaging with the Gen Xers? What about Gen Z? What are they doing? And what are the ways that they are interacting with organizations, and really starting to fold that into their plans? When we emerge out of the COVID era, because we will emerge, let's just name that, we will emerge out of the COVID era. I hope that there's a continuance of engaging with this intergenerational work that's being done with nonprofits, where they're really using multiple streams to engage all the different generations. Because for a long time, millennials and Gen Z were left on the sidelines, and there's this perception that they're too young and that they're not ready to engage with philanthropic work. But that's a lie. That is a lie. I'm a millennial. I am well into my career. I am ready to engage with organizations. I constantly engage with organizations, and I have peers that are engaging with organizations all the time. And so I really hope that after this, nonprofits and for-profits too, everybody just start paying attention to all of the generations and really nurture relationships across those generations.
And we're back, and that was our first millennial of the evening, Dominique Kix. We look forward to having her a part of the conversation in just a little bit, but we're gonna keep the introductions rolling, and now we're gonna head over to the West Coast and meet Kayla Foster, an entrepreneur, producer, and actor with her company, Rational Creatures Productions. Let's get to know a little bit more about Kayla Foster.
Hi, I'm Kayla Foster. I'm an actor and a producer with the production company Rational Creatures. I am 31 years old and I'm based in Los Angeles. So I've been a professional actor for about 12 years. My first professional job was around 19. I started a TV show called The Deuce on HBO, where I met my partner in my production company. Her name's Kate. She is a writer. We actually made a film first and decided maybe we should start a production company. We work really well together. And over the course of many years, we've been slowly but surely building this company together. Right before COVID, we started shooting a film, kind of anticipating, okay, we'll get this edited and ready to go by maybe spring or the summer, get it submitted to festivals. And it's funny because I remember Kate writing me a letter at the end of the film and writing 2020 is our year. And it wasn't. So we made our film, and obviously things were so behind. We kind of got it together a little bit, but everyone was chaotic. I think that the craziest part of thinking about the pandemic for me was everyone being home and everyone dealing with a different emotional journey. Like our editor working from home a little bit, she has a full-time job and was kind of figuring out how to navigate that. So our film couldn't have been her priority. You know, it was kind of like our film was kind of slowly but surely happening. And we, in the middle of the year, had a meeting with a network about this film to potentially turn it into a television show, which was going really well. We were moving forward in the process, and then the network totally shut down. Just because we have an opportunity doesn't mean it's going to go through. And that's, I guess, true all of the time. But in the pandemic, it just feels like we're putting ourselves out there to not even be sure if anything is going to happen. You know, I think what this pandemic has forced in me as a business person is to focus on the ways that I am able to move forward in terms of looking at that, thinking the show kind of fell through. The pandemic led to this network not really moving forward. What can I take out of this? And what I can take out of it is, you know, somebody liked our project. That's a great thing. Looking at the connections I made with amazing producers, you know, thinking about how that can help with the next project, focusing on how we felt in those meetings, what it taught us about our project, the direction we want to take it. It's kind of like the pandemic has shifted our focus to focusing on what makes us happy, what kind of projects we want to be making, creating relationships with people that have a similar taste level to us, people that we feel like we want to vibe with and make work with. So in a way, despite feeling like the outcomes are kind of impossible, we still are able to focus on almost something bigger in a way that, dare I say, positive, to focus on relationships and art and the reason we got into this and what kind of projects make us happy. Because the theme for this year for me, especially after last year, output versus input, putting it out there, not having an expectation of things coming back at this moment. We're making a short film this summer. We didn't intend to, but we want to do it. A friend of ours in New Orleans is going to throw a crew together for us. We just want to do something for fun. Our agents fight really hard for us to get into a room for an audition, where now it's all tapes. Everything is from home. So it doesn't actually take as much effort to watch an audition. To me, what feels really cool is that all of these meetings are kind of done on Zoom. Like, it feels like just take the meeting. That I would hope, you know, if I were to put myself in the shoes of somebody who has a bigger production company or is a network exec, I feel like I would want to take a chance on somebody else, because it really, what is an hour-long Zoom meeting with a fresh new voice? And I think also just politically and what's been going on in the world right now, kind of aside from the pandemic, just 2020 in general, I think that accountability is really important. And I think that people don't have a choice but to take in new voices, which is something that is very important as well. Part of what Kate and I entered into our business wanting to do was to give voices to people in the margins, which applies to so many things, but it applies to every single one of our projects. We're always thinking about untold stories, what is interesting, what is different, what hasn't been told before. And I would hope that because of the way that this year has affected the world, that people will be more and more open to taking a short Zoom meeting with somebody that maybe they wouldn't have met with in the past. I started the pandemic as a 30-year-old. I lived my 20s and I turned 30 amidst all of this. I turned 30 in January 2020. So it kind of feels like my 30s are this new phase of my life that started with this pandemic, kind of forced me to sit down, decide what I'm really in this for, decide why I'm doing this, kind of trim the fat on my life and decide, okay, I love acting, I love producing, I don't want to limit myself. Where can they converge? Where do they separate? And now I am so clear on myself as a professional going into the world in my 30s. It's really crazy to have, it's like I look back on my 20s as a different phase of my life because of this whole thing. I know how to walk into the next phase of my life, regardless of what is handed to me, regardless of what Kate and I are doing. I don't necessarily know, okay, we're going to be shooting X, Y, and Z film, because I don't know how much money I can make, and I don't know how much I can bring in, and I don't know what kind of connections I'm going to have at that point. But I'm open and I'm ready to go, and I'm ready for anything that flies at me, because I've taken the time to sit with myself and my kind of loose goals as a professional, and also kind of thinking about the work that we want to put out there, and we're ready.
And we're back. Thank you so much, Kayla Foster. Can't wait to hear more from her a little bit later on. But we're going to keep this thing moving and head back to New York City, where we're going to meet Matt Colette, a podcaster and executive producer at WNYC Studios. Take it away, Matt.
My name is Matt Colette. I'm 33. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I am a podcaster. I work at WNYC on a bunch of shows there. So 2019 ended. I was just getting ready to move back to New York. I spent about a year living down in Washington, D.C., and I was really excited to come back to the city. I was sort of able to return to a job. I'd worked at WNYC. I left, and I was able to come back in a new role, and I was really excited about that. Got hired as an executive producer working on a podcast called Trump Inc. It was an investigative show. And I was really excited to, be back at the place where I really started my career in audio, and also to sort of be back with friends and colleagues. And I was like super excited just to be back in the city. I'd missed going to theater. I'd missed hanging out with friends, and I sort of was super excited. The first couple of weeks, like there was a week when they were sort of like, hey, if you don't have to work in the office, you don't have to be here. And I was like, well, I got to be in the studio. I'm working with my team. And I remember one moment that feels like really bonkers now is I was like reading the novel Severance, which is about like millennials who keep showing up to work during a pandemic, as I was like sitting on the studio floor waiting for an engineer to deliver like one of the latest drafts of an episode. And then I was like, wait a minute, like, am I doing this bananas crazy thing too? And, pretty quickly we packed up and we switched to doing an edit. We normally would gather everybody around a conference room table, and we were like, I guess we're going to use this Zoom thing. And I remember like sending out the link with like, and then if you like mute yourself and hold the space bar, like that's a tip that I heard is really useful. And then we really quickly had to start figuring out like how to get people gear. And mostly it was like, what do people have? But on the production side, it was a bit like, do any of the stories we were working on matter anymore? So I worked on a show called Trump Inc., which was an investigative show about conflicts of interest in the Trump presidency. And suddenly it was like, well, does it matter right now to do a story about his accountants? It was pegged to a Supreme Court case, and the Supreme Court was suddenly just kind of on hold. And we tried to figure out how we could take the lens of our show and pivot it to be about something else. And then the other thing was like, how do we do all of this remotely? And it used to be, we'd pull in guests to our studios, we'd go to guests in their offices, and suddenly none of that was possible. So much of what we used to do involved going places and capturing not just people in conversation, but trying to build scenes, capturing people in their jobs, in the places they were. And suddenly all we had was the interview, and trying to figure out like, how do you make a scene? How do you bring something to life? How do you illustrate something when you've just got conversation? I got to this point sometimes when like somebody's dog barked or a kid made noise. A version of me in the past would have been annoyed, but I was like, great, it's a moment that might also show character. It required us, starting to think about like, how can we use tape that existed in the world, either like archival tape or the news? How can we start to build scenes that way? It also gave us an opportunity to think about what else we could do with audio. This summer, one of my colleagues had been in touch with the Public Theater, which puts on Shakespeare in the Park, which is like big challenge of each summer. And sometimes my big victory is like getting a ticket to go see Shakespeare in the Park. And they canceled it this year. And then WNYC started working with the Public Theater saying like, could we turn this into like a radio play, like a good old-fashioned radio play that still sounded like modern and of this moment, and maybe even said something about what we were sort of going through that summer, when it wasn't just the coronavirus, but it was also conversations about George Floyd and race. And then we were able to start building this play and building sort of the contextual material around it so that people could listen to a play that they couldn't go to, but they might be able to listen to it in their car, in the park, to replicate it a bit, but to try to create like events. So we started thinking about like what else we could be doing. I think as an industry, I mean, there's a lot of conversations over people are less inclined to put up with stuff that they had before. And then my industry especially has had a lot of reckonings over power and over race, and a lot of really frank conversations, and hopefully some action on it, and certainly a lot more to go. And so that's like a big part of it. I worked with my colleagues where we spent hours and hours and hours over the sort of fall and winter working sort of across departments to build a plan to sort of to tackle big issues of race and equity in my own workplace. And I think there are some people who are like very happy to work from home, but like I hate it. I hate I miss like there's a big central staircase in my office, and you just sort of pass people on that all the time. And I'd wind up knowing what my colleagues on other shows were working on. They'd know what I was working on, and they'd say like, hey, you should talk to this person. You should talk to that person. And I sort of miss all my sort of like my staircase moments, my like diagonal connections. I talk a ton to my team, but it's often in the much more formal ways. I don't realistically expect to be working in an office this year. I would love to, but I don't think that's going to happen. I hope that I like remember the stuff that I missed. I hope that I don't take for granted again, like that I like running into colleagues and having those weird conversations. And I hope that I haven't like romanticized all of the stuff that I'm missing. I hope I haven't turned like going to the office and riding on the train into like a magical thing. But I hope that I'm able to like be collaborating in new ways. And I hope that like we all kind of keep the scrappiness we have, which is like, okay, how do we do something new that we haven't done before? Like keep that enthusiasm to keep making new stuff that we hadn't done, to figure out like, okay, how can we collaborate with people even if we're not in the same building or the same city, and how can we take these tools that we have now to like continue the work that we do and the mission that we have to tell public radio stories that really make a difference and that really help connect people.
Welcome back, and thank you, Matt Colette. We'll be hearing a little bit more from him a little bit later on. But now I want to bring it back to our hometown, Boston, for our next two millennials. First up is Tim Hall, an award-winning musician, poet, and assistant professor at Berklee College of Music. Please meet Tim Hall.
My name is Tim Hall. I am originally from Detroit, Michigan, and have been living in Boston for almost 8 years now. I currently live in Malden, Mass, and am a educator, artist, and entrepreneur. I sit as a assistant professor in the professional music department at Berklee College of Music. I'm co-owner of Hipstery, which is a digital media production company, and team member with BAMS Fest, which is Boston Art, Music, and Soul Festival, along with musician as a saxophonist and spoken word artist, producer, and session musician. Pre-COVID, life was just as busy in some ways. I was a assistant professor in the Career Center at Berklee. The top of 2020 was when I transitioned from my full-time job to a part-time position in faculty as an opportunity for me to focus a little more on my artistry, building out some of the businesses that I'm a part of, and give a little more energy to my creative works and really producing content and creating content that I want to sustain me. I'd also say that things were very busy at times. I'd have 2 or 3 shows in a weekend or 3 rehearsals and a couple of shows a week. So things were quite busy with managing a full-time job and also all of the other things that I was involved in. I missed performing a lot. I performed and was on stage a large chunk of my times. There were multiple projects going on throughout the year, depending on the season, depending on the time of the year. BAMS Festival happens in the summer in June. I was preparing a lot, often in running with our team, everything that was involved with my role as artist relations manager and making sure artists had all of the information and communication they needed to show up and perform. My company Hipstery, we had a bi-monthly program called Hipstery House Party that was curated in person, along with a series of different grants that we were applying for that allowed us to roll out certain programming. My responsibilities at my office and work with the school semester, students coming in the spring, as well as the fall and the summer, all of our programming within our office and getting an understanding of what was going on required everyone to slow down. Things have not necessarily, they've slowed down in the sense of, okay, we don't have gigs, we don't have rehearsals. When COVID hit us in the March months of 2020, I was in my first semester teaching, was quite scared. I remember the day that classes were going to be canceled for the rest of the day and then for the rest of the semester, and students being confused, seeing folks walking on the sidewalks, not wanting to, avoiding shaking hands. And I remember feeling as though I made a big mistake in transitioning out of my salary job that came with health insurance and all of these other benefits that I, in transitioning to part-time no longer had access to in the same way or at the same amount. And I just remember feeling confused. I was definitely in shock. I was definitely scared and worried, like almost on a daily basis. I was getting an email. Unfortunately, this has been postponed. Unfortunately, this has been canceled. I lost roughly $13,000 to $15,000 in gigs within a matter of a couple of weeks. I was scheduled to open up for BJ Chicago Kid, a super dope artist out of Chicago, was planned to do this really incredible performance at the BSO. Soul, was gonna perform at Boston Calling, had some of the biggest gigs of my career at the time, and it all just a snap of a finger, it's just done. Along with BAM's festival, the festival itself, we had to cancel it. At least I've been able to still maintain a really consistent career as a musician during COVID because thankfully I have some awareness and understanding of some of those platforms, as well as the nature of my company being a digital media production company. We have the skill set and the talent to be able to, what do folks know? How do we do our programming just in this different way? I've had opportunities to sit on more panels and do more like master classes or talks and so forth. For me, is just allowing me to share my like art and share my perspective, share my story in a unique way. We miss performing, we miss human interaction, we miss crowd engagement, selling our merch, talking to the bartenders, hanging out for the sound check, kicking it in the green room, all of the things that come with performing in presenting yourself in a physical form. There's no replacement. Students are worried about the future of the industry. They miss being in school. They miss going to class. I don't see us veering away from the virtual performing, virtual hosting. I've also seen that individuals have been able to create more access from having virtual event because you don't have to necessarily have the physical place that you have to go to or a super big ticket price for a fundraiser or a gala. You have to pay for the overhead of hosting something like that. I think companies and organizations are seeing some of the benefits of being able to do things virtually and it still be really beautiful and it be engaging and fun. However, there's still nothing that's going to beat an in-person gathering. Like it just, there's no way to replicate that in a virtual space in the same way. Things like, when somebody books me for a digital based gig, like who owns that final piece of work? I don't think artists had conversations like that in the same way as they are having that now. And I think that there's going to be more artists who have used this time to hone in on a skill, to learn Twitch, or to learn how to do a live stream, learn how to record their own music, learn how to, learn a new instrument and so forth. So I think this time has created an opportunity for individuals to invest in themselves. And we're going to start to see the fruit of that investment trickling out after, we were able to work through and get through COVID.
Thank you, Tim Hall. More from Tim very soon. But for now, let's move on to our next panelist, also from Boston, Chassity Boick, activist, civil rights leader, a transgender health advocate, and the director of the Transgender Emergency Fund. Please meet our dear friend, Chassity Boick.
Hi, my name is Chassity Boick. I use she, her, and her pronouns. I am 35 years old. I currently reside in Dorchester, Massachusetts, and I'm currently the executive director of the Transgender Emergency Fund and the current board treasurer for Trans Resistance Massachusetts. Before the pandemic, life for me looked like working 3 jobs. I was currently at the time working at Boston Medical Center full-time, Boston Healthcare for the Homeless part-time, and then the volunteer executive director of the Transgender Emergency Fund. So we were in a mix of planning a lot of live events, a lot of live fundraisers, and just really getting people together while we try to organize on the back end our transitional housing program. Trans Resistance had yet to be put together, and then COVID hit. So over 2020, Transgender Emergency Fund, we wanted to curate a brand new board. We also wanted to get our transitional housing program off the ground, whether that be completing research on zoning and different areas in the city. When the COVID-19 first hit the United States, we were hit with an overwhelming application response, and people were scared of, am I going to have surgery that's scheduled to be coming up? Also, I'm losing my job now because a lot of the trans community works in retail and hospitality, and as we know, those things were starting to shut down. So a lot of our community was starting to panic, and rightfully so. Another urgency that we saw was people needing homelessness prevention. So now my partner contracted COVID, I can't go to work, I'm out of work now, and now the rent is getting backed up. So we, searched for funding. We were able to get a lot of funding from Boston Foundation, and that allowed us to assist people with homelessness prevention, utility assistance, and continue our personal supply program, where we were able to provide gift cards to individuals during this time to be able to get basic needs like soap and toilet tissue and toothpaste. So it just really started to take off in a way that we were not prepared for. We began to have a waiting list for services. And then in the midst of all of that, we had the incident with George Floyd. So we were shaken up. We was trying to figure out what can we do to keep things moving, to keep things going, and also to show our community that we are here for them. So it was a very pivotal year. We also at the same time wanted to raise $100,000 to go towards programming and also our transgender housing program, and we were able to do that. I think fundraising in the beginning of COVID-19, it was very difficult because we were used to having, live events, outdoor gatherings to where we can do fundraising. So we were not allotted to do so at that time, but then became available a lot of COVID-19 relief funding. So I think that we were able to raise a lot more funding in 2020, much more than past years, unfortunately due to such a pandemic, but we were able to utilize those funds to help people stay afloat during that pandemic. Instagram, Facebook have definitely been our main two go-tos for programming and online content. And now, pretty much going forward, a lot of our things are going to be online. But I think that it also has brought us together in so many ways. There's so many different trans groups that across the country now that have connected now that everybody's online. So I think it's been very beneficial. If we hadn't experienced this pandemic, there's no doubt in my mind that we would not have reached the capacity that we've reached last year, where we were able to serve 187 unique individuals with a wide range of services. The silver lining that I would take from me personally is that you never know what you can accomplish when you're up against the wall. And the COVID-19 had us all up against the wall because nobody knew what to do. So I think it's just about being prepared, having a backup plan, and being able to stay in tune with your community regardless of what kind of pandemic is going on. So a year from now, I would love for number one, for the Trans Emergency Fund to have obtained some sort of building or house and have started our transitional housing program. And then also making sure that most of our community knows how to get vaccinated, and a percentage are vaccinated. And just to use this vaccination to be able to go back out in community and to continue to seek social services and obtain employment and go to school. So I'm excited for what the next year could bring. So people can check us out on Facebook, the Transgender Emergency Fund of Massachusetts, the same on Instagram, and you can always go to our website, transemergencyfund.org, to sign up to be on our email listings, and if you want to volunteer or just figure out how you may play a part in this pivotal moment that we are in right now.
And we're back, and thank you so much, Chassity, for sharing about all of your incredible work. I can't wait to have you with us in just a few moments. But now we're going to head back to Los Angeles and meet Christina Alabato, an actor and voiceover artist who was last seen starring as Gretchen Wieners in Mean Girls on Broadway. Please meet Christina Alabato.
Hey everyone, my name's Christina Alabato. I am a 31-year-old actor. I usually am living in New York City, but because of the pandemic, I've kind of been bouncing back and forth, driving the whole time between New York City and Los Angeles. So before the pandemic, like I said, I'm an actor. I'm based in New York City. I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona, and I found my way to New York. In my freshman year of college, I got the opportunity to do the first national tour of Spring Awakening. And so I left school to pursue that. So I was going to pursue musical theater, Broadway. That was sort of where my heart was. And so after that tour, I moved to New York. And from there, over the 10 years that I spent in New York City, made my Broadway debut in Green Day's American Idiot, did a couple other Broadway shows, off-Broadway shows, TV and film work. I started doing voiceover, so I did cartoon work. And then right before the pandemic, I had spent the last year playing Gretchen Wieners in the Broadway production of Mean Girls, which is like so much fun and very fetch. So before the pandemic hit, I was actually dealing with a lot of personal things. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. So I had spent the previous year doing Mean Girls whilst helping my mother and figuring out how to help her from afar. And actually in January, she passed away. So I spent the beginning of 2020 not actually focused on the pandemic as much as I was focused on the care of my mother and saying goodbye to her. So I was flying back and forth a lot between New York and Phoenix. I think that was what was unique about my situation, is that because I was going through all that, my mom was the greatest person ever, my best friend. She taught me everything I knew. Also, like, my mom loved theater. She was able to see the show actually that year in earlier 2019 between treatments. She was able to fly all the way to New York to see it, which was amazing. So there was something so, I think what I love about theater and our community in New York in general is just how close we are. And that, you know, even though I took some time off and getting back in February, I was back to like this safe place and my community and my family, and like also feeling like I'm doing what I love. And that helped, you know, in grieving and stuff. It's very hard to find anything that helps you, especially at the beginning, but to have the show where I got to make people laugh and where I got to have fun and where I got to do what I love and take a break from reality for a second was so helpful. At the theater, you know, things were starting to become just a little bit tense at the theater. We kept having meetings with our front of house. So like starting in mid-February, we had our first big meeting with our entire crew, front of house, cast, costumes, everything, where we all sat and we, the house manager told us, you know, about washing our hands and about if you're sick, stay home. So those really basic things, again, still somehow. And sometimes I look back and I go, man, I must have just been a dummy. That like, I was like, this is going to pass. We're going to take a couple of days off. They're going to clean the theater. Then the meetings turned into like, okay, no more high-fiving backstage, no more hugging backstage, sanitize your hands, no more stage doors. So they cut the stage door completely, which is when I was like, oh, this is not good. And so I think leading up to when we actually shut down, in the days, it was weird. In the weeks prior, I was like, oh, we're going to be fine. And then in the days leading up to it, like it was the day the NBA shut down basically. So like the beginning of that week, Broadway shut down on our last show was a Wednesday night show. And so that beginning of the week. And so I think in the beginning of that week, we were like, I don't know how much longer we're going to be able to be open. I wonder what's going to happen. And then the NBA shut down. And I was like, okay. They basically just called on Thursday and they were like, we're not doing the show. You know, we'll let you know what the update is. But right now we're not going to do the show for a while. And we kind of thought it was going to be like a couple weeks. Yeah. So as time continued and as, you know, a couple of weeks being shut down turned into a couple of months, turned into we're going to open back up in June. And then we're not going to open up until the fall. Like, so as these things kept kind of, you know, but also I was in New York. So I understood, I was in New York from the shutdown until May. So that was like the worst. I mean, New York got hit so aggressively hard at the beginning. It's funny. I went from, this isn't a big deal to no one understands how bad this is, because I was in the eye of the storm, right? It actually made us all as a country slow down and actually face some things that we either say we don't have time to deal with, or I'm too busy for that, or we'll deal with that later, or it's not that big of a deal. And then incredibly, what ends up happening when you take one step back, take a breather, everyone has different priorities now, is that things that really need to come to the surface and come to light, like Black Lives Matter, like our political situation in the country, becomes way more palpable, and it's always been there. But I think one of the things, as I look back at the year, I've gone the last 12 years of my career in and out of work. So being unemployed is a very normal thing for me, because again, I wish that there was a way that I could go from Broadway show to TV show to Broadway show to like for my whole life without breaks. But it is a continual, like, you do a really great job and then you start auditioning again and you figure out what's going to be next. So I think the hardest for us was that there's nothing. So for a while, there was absolutely nothing. Now it's a little bit better. And I think I'm grateful for, you know, the lifestyle that I have had as an actor, is that I know what it's like to get scrappy and to get creative with how to not only make money, but stay happy. I think some people have a really hard time, and me too, because I love working. I'm a worker bee. I love working. I'm a boss, like thrive in that. It's been a good challenge for me to be like, why can't I just enjoy sitting with myself myself. So if I fast forward to a year from now, what do I want for all of us? What do I want for myself, for the Broadway community, for theater in general? I think it sort of goes back to what I was just talking about with I want to keep pushing forward. So I think what's been interesting about this year has been, how can I move forward with nothing available to me, right? And you pivot to different things. I started a YouTube channel. I think for artists in general, I hope over the next year, as things come back to some semblance of normalcy as the vaccine comes out, that artists will continue creating and not waiting. I mean, I think that's the thing that I keep telling myself, is that I don't want to wait for everything to return. And I think, continuing to just be creative and try different things has been fun for me, and I hope other artists can do. I think, for our, age group, it's really just just taking advantage of the time and not letting it hold you back, that this got in my way. Cause I don't want to go my whole life thinking that this ruined it,
Thank you so much, Christina. And in just literally a few moments, Christina will be here on the stream with me, with the rest of the Millennial Voices that you've already met, for that live conversation. But first, we're going to meet our final voice for the evening, Hannah Watson. Hannah is an HR professional and a mother living outside of London in the UK. She's going to share her experiences living abroad during the middle of the pandemic, as well as what it's been like raising a 3-year-old child during these uncertain times. And due to the time difference, Hannah unfortunately won't be joining us for the live conversation tonight. So we did make her intro video just a little bit longer so you could get the full scope of her story. But when I return, the time will have finally arrived, and I will be joined by the rest of the Millennials who you've met for that group conversation. But first, let's meet Hannah Watson.
I'm Hannah Watson. I'm 34. Can't quite believe I'm 34. And I live in Milton Keynes, just north of London in the UK. I work in London as an HR professional, working mostly from home at the moment. So my family is made up of myself, my husband James, and my son Griff, who's just turned 3. We are currently on the sort of pathway for an autism diagnosis for him. So in January, February of last year, I was working part-time, mostly from home, but also traveling into London. I used to love those London days were like my days, when I'd go into the office and I'd be able to grab a coffee on my way in. And I just felt like we've got the right balance here. We've got my son in daycare, my husband working as well. And it just felt like we're getting into routine. And just as that sort of happened, the coronavirus pandemic hit, and everything was thrown threw us for a loop, as did everyone, I think. I'd settled back into work following mat leave. He had just turned 2. We were planning on going to a friend's wedding in the US, a trip to Canada we had planned. We felt like things were starting to slot into place. And I think that just as we were starting to have that feeling, kind of everything went out the window. Things happened really quickly at the beginning of the pandemic. One day, we didn't know about it. The next day, we heard that things were getting really bad in the Southeast, which is where we work. And people started talking about food shortages, which was really scary. Going to the grocery store and seeing empty shelves, which I've never seen before unless there was like a snowstorm. Just things happening overnight. We were sort of plunged into a lockdown. They said that, don't leave your house unless you need to. Don't send your child to school unless you're a key worker, which we weren't. And it just kind of, everything was thrown overnight. In the early days of lockdown, we were both working, and it was a real struggle to get that childcare work balance right. I don't think we did get it right. I'm not sure you ever get it right. I sort of put my hand up once the furlough scheme was introduced and volunteered to go on furlough, which was a total blessing for our family because it meant that my husband could work and I could do all the childcare. And unlike, I think in the US, the furlough scheme wasn't paid, but for us it was such a blessing because in the UK it was. So it just meant that we could kind of keep going with life in a new way. We had been living just south of London and we wanted to get more green space. So once the lockdown lifted temporarily, we sort of took our chance, jumped at it, and moved to Milton Keynes where we could be beside a park and have a garden. My furlough ended, so we settled Griff into a new nursery. And I found out that I was pregnant. So I'm expecting a second boy in June. Being a parent during the pandemic has been so challenging and really lonely, I think, is one of the feelings that just comes. You don't have any adult interaction and you're at home, especially in a time like this. Beforehand, we would be going to the library for like rhyme time. I'd grab a Starbucks on the way home, talk to like the barista even to get a bit of interaction. And I think being at home all the time, day in, day out, not being able to leave the house has been a struggle, and it has been lonely. We've had about 4 or 5 chunks where we've had to self-isolate because there's been a positive test in the nursery. We had to send him and just kind of hope for the best. They've got really good processes and procedures in place at the nursery. They keep the hygiene levels really good, but we have had some scares where there have been positive tests in his bubble, and we've all had to stay home and just hope for the best. Working from home and not having to do a long commute has been a blessing. So with my first son, I was living in Cardiff and working in Bristol, and I did a 2-hour commute each way, which was so draining, especially in the beginning of pregnancy when I was feeling terrible, and in the end when I was enormous and just so tired. Also, sort of concealing a pregnancy when you're not quite ready to talk about it is a struggle. And so second time round, I definitely found I showed earlier, and I'm so relieved that all of my calls have been like this. And I've been able to be in my loungewear, from the waist down. The appointments have been really different. So they've been much colder. You wear the mask, you keep your distance. It's a very different experience. We're heading out of lockdown, hopefully. The Prime Minister over here has kind of released a roadmap, is what they call it, sort of a way out of lockdown. And I think the mood is hopeful. It's felt like a real slog the last year, and I think we've kind of got a new normal of where we are. So we work from home mostly. Probably we'll be going back to the office a little bit down the road. We have a news report every day, and it says number of cases, number of vaccines, and just seeing those numbers gives me hope for sure. Being pregnant, I won't be having the vaccine anytime soon. I think you can't have it while you're breastfeeding either, but looking forward to that, to hopefully be able to travel again. Probably the number one blessing for me has been the time I've had with Griff. It's been like the gift of time, while the autism diagnosis is really long and there's so much stress put on early intervention. And every day I worry, am I doing enough? Am I reaching out to enough people? I'm doing as much as I can. We've done private speech and occupational therapy, so I've been working away on that and just kind of being given the gift of time to do as much as I possibly can. I've also just reconnected with wonderful friends, so friends that I've been in touch with, but we've done like a weekly Zoom call on Sundays where we talk about life and the Real Housewives, and it's so fun. And my husband does a pub call with his friends on Friday nights, and they have a couple drinks, and just he's more in touch with them now than I think he ever has been. And I think because people haven't been able to go out, they've made that commitment to staying in touch online, which has been great. I've also really turned to social media to connect with people. And I think before, I'm not sure I would have done that because I found it hard and a bit lonely, I've turned to social media, and I've met some wonderful mums, parents in general, but also parents of children on the autism spectrum. And I've learned so much from them and through conversations I've had. In the future, I hope that we never see a pandemic like this again. I will be probably thinking about going back to work following the birth of my second son. I hope to have gained back a bit of my confidence, maybe. I think that being out of the workforce has definitely knocked my confidence, and I want to work on that a little bit and hope to, just knowing that I'm kind of done having children, kind of close that chapter and maybe look at my career a little bit more. I hope that our generation just get cracking with life, because I think, this year has been tough and we've all learned things about ourselves, but it's our time now to get going and to just live life the best we can. I think it's taught me that some things are really important and some things are not important. And I think that's something that I want to take forward with me in the coming years and the rest of my life. I've got an Instagram account. It's at That Mummy Life. Mummy is with an I. So I talk about life in general, about what I love, things that make me happy, about my son, who obviously makes me happy. And I share in my stories, some of the day-to-day things that I'm learning. So yeah, I'd love for you to come along on that journey.
And we're back, and the time has finally come. I'm not alone on the stream. I'm here with most of our millennials in our panel that you just met. Once again, we do thank Hannah for sharing and being a part of this evening and sharing in that video. And we wish she was here, but I'm here with all of you. Welcome to the stream. It's been such a pleasure getting to know each and every one of you a little bit more one-on-one over the past couple of weeks, but I've been waiting to bring you all together. And so we're gonna dive into a whole bunch, and we're just gonna get started so that we can get through it all. But this is a reminder to everyone that's watching out there, if you have a question for our panel or anyone in particular, you can submit that by going to slido.com and entering the code Millennials, just as it is scrolling at the top of your screen right now, and I'll work that into our conversation tonight. But I think to start, we just met you and heard about your past year. I'm hoping we can go around and each of you can quickly reintroduce yourself to the audience, but also give us a life update. Like, how are you all doing? Are there any updates since we last chatted? So Dominique, let's start with you.
Yeah, so hi everyone, it's me, Dominique. Not much to update on because we're still here. I'm still optimistic. I'm still excited about working at the YW and being an engaged millennial, but there's not much that's changed since we last chatted because it's still COVID.
Yeah, the COVID era is still alive, as Dominique said. Kayla, how about you?
Same, Dominique. I'm Kayla again. Yeah, not much of an update. Getting on,
Great.
Doing what we do, being on Zoom.
Yeah. And Tim, how about you?
Hey everyone, Tim Hall in same, very much just getting through the semester, getting through, trying to make decisions and moves as a small business to keep the lights on and continue to try and imagine programs and stuff that we do in this space. There's been a lot of strategic planning and a lot of time to try to get resources and access to mentorship to help us through just different challenges that we've been faced with, and still kind of navigating one, just having a business in general that you run, but then two, doing that during COVID. But very thankful to be here and super appreciative to be a part of this incredible panel.
We're thrilled to have you too. Matt, Colette, how are things down in New York?
Things are going all right, though I'm not seeing much of it. I migrated all the way from my desk to my living room floor. I'm waiting for some edits for tomorrow's episode of the experiment we make with WNYC in the Atlantic, and just kind of carrying along on this familiar loop at this point.
Great. And Christina, you're still in LA, correct?
Yep, still in LA. The biggest thing that's changed is it rained today, and it hasn't rained here in a long time while I've been here, which is nice because I'm, like I said in my video, I'm usually in New York, so it's kind of nice to have a little sun during winter time. But yeah, nothing much has changed. Just kind of, just in the groove of, our industry during this time, which is way different than it was last year. So kind of getting used to it, and also still like not wanting to get used to it because I just wanted to kind of not be COVID anymore, but
For sure. And Chassity, how about you, my friend? How's everything in Boston?
Hello, Chassity here. Pretty much like everybody else, just trying to make each day count, make each day matter, and just try to uplift my community and let them know that hope is not all gone, and try to focus on the next steps and just getting things together. Our main focus for the Trans Emergency Fund this year is to try to obtain a piece of property that we can call our own and to really get this transitional housing program going.
Such important works. Thank you all again for being here. I want to start, there's three of you that sort of work in different spheres of the arts and live performance industry, Christina, Kayla, and Tim. Christina, let's hear from you first. Where is Broadway at right now? Where does theater stand currently in thinking about a reopen? What's the energy like currently in the theater community?
Yeah, our sphere of performance is so specifically complicated to this time just because the only way we thrive, the only way we reopen is when we can have 1,000 people in a small, old, not probably greatly filtered theater. And we have to pretty much sell at full capacity for these shows to be able to continue running. So it's not like we can run Broadway at 30% capacity or even 50% capacity. So I think that's been the challenge for Broadway. Mean Girls is one of the casualties of Broadway, which is so difficult. We were a hit show and we got notice in January that we were officially closing for good because of the pandemic and only because of the pandemic. So I think it's just been interesting to watch the Broadway community try to figure out how to hold on for as long as possible so that as many shows as possible can come back. And again, like I said, the difficulty being they can't open too soon because if they don't sell fully, they won't be able to sustain, staying open. So it's been interesting to watch, and obviously really sad that things haven't been able to make it, but I have all the confidence in the world. I'm a really optimistic person, like you're saying, Dominique, about yourself. And I just feel like there's going to be things that change. And I think that a lot of the shows will return and give their best effort at figuring out how to make it through this time. I'm sad mine isn't continuing, but it was the best decision for our show, based on what the producers and things thought. So, that's kind of the update with the Broadway world. It's sort of waiting, hoping that the vaccine continues to, be widely distributed. And, also Broadway is really, really dependent on tourism in New York and people coming into the city. So I think it has to do with that too, which is tricky. So whenever people start coming back to New York is when I think Broadway will start thinking about actually reopening.
Well, we all miss it, and we'll touch base on the vaccine a little bit later on. Tim, we're getting a lot of questions that sort of are similar to my question in the Q&A. People are just curious of what is the climate like in the music scene in Boston right now. There was a recent announcement, I believe, that venues may soon be able to start reopening in certain parts of the city or state, and I'm assuming that's caused some excitement. But are venues starting to rebook again? Where do things stand? You're on mute, Tim. The line of 2020 and 2021.
Right, exactly. It's a mixed bag because it so depends on the discipline within the music industry that you are part of, and specifically how that impacts you. For me, as a performing artist, we're excited that there's some movement, but not excited at the fact that things are opening when it's still a tough bag when you have medical experts saying it's not the best decision. So it's been a little hard to really get excited about the announcement without still having the tension of concern about the safety. Definitely individuals are at least starting to reach out. Booking agents and talent bookers are starting to at least get a sense from artists if they would be comfortable coming to do a show. I've already received a number of reach outs just saying hey, they just made this announcement. What's your comfort level? What are you feeling in terms of would you be willing to perform in a venue with people in there and so forth? And for me, as a saxophonist, I can't just have a mask on while I perform, whereas there are other instruments that can still at least have their mask on in a performance venue and be able to perform. So I'm often on the end of, I'm going to hold off until it feels a little more comfortable with going into venues. I haven't performed in front of a group of individuals in a venue since March of last year. And with that, the digital space has created a really dope opportunity for artists and musicians to build their audience, create new work, engage with their art form in a new way. I believe that artists and musicians were already in the digital space pre-COVID, and those who weren't had just now kind of been forced to learn and forced to kind of get an idea of what would it like to, get a camera, get some lighting, get a mic, and see what you can do. What can you learn on YouTube, or what can you learn from friends who have been able to do it? Twitch, Patreon, Facebook Live, and so forth have been platforms that have been incredibly beneficial for artists and musicians during this time to be able to co-write and co-create with individuals across the world, to just simply show your creative process while you're in the studio or while you're in your bedroom writing, and bring individuals into your life and your world as a musician, which I think in some ways individuals like the process more than the final product. In some rights, during this time, individuals have been able to invite their audience into their creative process to give them a look into their life, hopefully creating a little more empathy and understanding and connection with the artist who's making the art. Sometimes the art is focused on and the artist gets overlooked. So this time I think has been able to allow folks to focus on the artists and understand what we go through and how we come up with the things that they enjoy to consume. And then on the festival side, we are adapting much like everybody else. Festivals have had to completely been cut. Fortunately for BAM's festival, we are moving forward with a hybrid model for this year, and doing some things pre-filmed and some things in person, being that part of that is going to be outside and outdoors, which makes it a little more safe and a little more inviting for the community to engage, especially being that the programming is free, to at least come out to an event and it be outdoors and not have to worry about going inside, and kind of addressing that concern for most individuals. And then from a recording studio perspective, a lot of recording studios have been in limbo. For us, we had to wait until we were able to open up a second room in order to safely be able to record individuals. So in that process, we've had to take a risk at spending money to invest in an asset that would generate revenue, even though we had no revenue coming in. So it's been also a lot of calculated risk for business owners and individuals who are running production companies, or like the individuals on this panel who might be, putting on film productions and so forth, where some of it's a lot of us investing in ourselves and taking a little bit of risk, hoping that this content would create more engagement, would give us an opportunity to pitch to other bigger institutions or networks so that we can continue to leverage what we're making and what we're creating, but then also to be creative, to be have some ingenuity around what we're doing, how we're doing it, and really kind of fall back on our connections with one another, our relationships, and sound like, we're all creators. Let's create together and leverage those things collectively so that we can continue to kind of build and navigate our careers together, rather than feeling like we need to do this alone.
I love it. Kayla Foster, the film and television industry, it's one that has seemed to reopen, and I'm curious, is that just for major studios? Like, how are the smaller sort of startup entrepreneurial producers and filmmakers doing?
We're moving and shaking. There's definitely, I have a bunch of filmmaker friends who are just going for it and wishing for the best. I think it's kind of like what Tim is saying. We just miss working together. A set is such a magical place. I think everybody spent all of this time developing. We all sat down with our ideas, and now everyone's so excited to be together, and safely, obviously. There's big sets, there's smaller sets, everyone's going and trying and, following all of the guidelines that we possibly can. There's that safety tension that Tim was talking about too. It's like, it's scary and hard. And I know for actors, like, taking off that mask, it's scary. But I think that the love for making film is more present than ever, and everybody wants to get going. I find, that's kind of the technical side. The interesting thing that I'm seeing in terms of development, and even just as a viewer, and talking to friends who are starting to work on new projects, is the content of, scripted projects. Like how involved in COVID are we in this story? And I think it's redefined what television is. Is television about escapism? Do we watch television because we want to leave our lives and be with a few other people that are going through something completely different than us? Or do we want television to reflect our current experience? And so I find that to be really interesting on the developmental side, that I think has changed as we're kind of living in this for a long time.
I want to shift to our two fundraisers who come from that sector. I'm curious of how the landscape for fundraising is currently. You're both in Boston and both working with nonprofits. So are people starting to look ahead and starting to sort of plan those more traditional fundraising efforts like in-person events, galas, or is that still all sort of virtually focused right now? Like how is the fundraising being affected? Chassity, can we start with you? You've had an incredible year and such a successful year despite the circumstances from this perspective.
Definitely, James. Right now, we're still focused on a lot of online fundraising, but we are in the midst of planning our June 12th event, where we're going to have a visual and march and hopefully our version of Pride through Trans Resistance. And right now, we're just having two backup plans. Number one is we're going to have this big Pride parade with vendors and tables. And then the other is where we just have a regular visual and march. Either we're still trying to raise $250,000 this year, and I think that's going to be doable because people had the time now to really sometimes on the computer, sit down and really Google and find out about my community and the things that we need and how we've been deprived for so long. So it has helped us a lot, especially on online platforms where people have messaged us like, I didn't know this about your community and how can we get more involved? So in retrospect, it has been very beneficial for us. And I see us going that route in the future with a lot of online programming, just like a lot of our other local organizations.
Wonderful. And Dominique, how about you? How are things with YW? Has this been a challenging year for you professionally as a fundraiser, where I feel like a lot of that work has got to be making those connections, right? So how has that been through a virtual box?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. I think that with fundraising, it's such a relational field. Like you're spending your time getting to know your particular donors, your volunteers, whoever's coming in and acting as a constituent to your organization. And it's really hard to do that over Zoom or WebEx or whatever your platform you're using, because there's just something about being physically present with a person. Like I can reach out and touch the person's hand or give them a hug or do something that lets them know that we're physically in the space together. And you can't really do that over Zoom. And it's harder to build a genuine connection because there's the fact that like you can be distracted by the many tabs that you have open. I'm someone who habitually has like 20 tabs open. So it's like, which tab should I be looking at? Or what should I be doing now? Or like, what documents you want me to look at? So there's so many things that are able to distract you as you're trying to build those virtual connections. And then there's the fact that you're literally barred by the screen because you're literally looking into a screen and not actually looking at that person. So it's all completely different. And as fundraisers, as we're starting to think about, so what are we doing next year? There's this vaccine. You still have to consider all these factors of like, is somebody going to be comfortable coming to this large event? What's the size of our event? So there's a lot of things that you have to think of. And like Chassity said, there's a lot of plan A, B, C, all the way up to Z probably for fundraisers at this point.
Matt, I want to shift to you. To me, I would think it would be a really interesting time for journalism, specifically podcasting and radio. Has it been sort of a big boom for the industry? Has engagement increased while people are stuck in their homes, or has the loss of something like a commute sort of actually hindered the industry in some way? Do you have any insight on that?
I have heard, and in the industry, it sounds like, podcasts are doing really well. People are listening more, which I personally find it bonkers because I'm listening a lot less. My commute to and from the office was like the time when I could listen to the stuff I wasn't working on. And that's gone. But then the real challenges come to how we actually make this stuff. And a lot of it, even though we can make a lot of podcasts and audio, remotely, everybody's in their closets, everybody's under a blanket recording themselves. And then those files get merged together and the listener often can't tell that, it sounds the same as if everybody was in the same room. But now it's a lot harder because, when we're talking to guests, we're often trying to get them to tell us something, sensitive for an investigative show, something really personal. And that's just hard to do over a Zoom, especially when I'm also saying, and hey, can you use your smartphone and record yourself and then send me the file afterward? And so people are being like, not just their vulnerable selves, but also their own audio engineers. And so that's like an ongoing challenge. I mean, it's nothing compared with what my colleagues on the actual terrestrial radio are going through. We never went off the air, even though, most of the hosts and most of the engineers, most of the producers who touch the, actual WNYC NPR radio, are working from home. I'm getting a taste of that just this week because it's pledge right now. So if you listen to WNYC, now is a great time to donate. But I have received a kit in a Pelican case that I'm hardwiring into my router that I'm doing terribly with boundaries on because the IT man is asking me questions about it right now. And I'm like, please wait a minute. But it is a full-time job to just kind of keep things seamless without sort of trying to kind of take advantage of this moment when things are growing and doing really well, to also just kind of keep making good work.
For sure. It's on that note, sort of an overarching theme that seemed to come up in a lot of your stories and in our conversations was, specifically this word scrappy and the concept of millennials being known as a scrappy generation. And I think that word is actually used a lot to describe Gen Y inside and outside of COVID times. Why do you think that is? And why do you think that this trait has been so pivotal during this time? Christina, you were one of those folks that specifically used that word about yourself. So do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that comes from my verbiage of that for myself and a lot of my friends. I think comes from being an artist, being an actor. It's a very interesting lifestyle path, career path to go down because there's a lot of I've had to be my own boss, the CEO of Christina Alabato for my entire career, as does everyone in whatever field they decide to be in. We all have to run our own little companies, right? That's how we can move forward. And I don't know if so for me, that came in with having to always acquire another job. Even though I'm on Broadway in a show, I'm still trying to figure out what my next job is going to be. I'm still throwing auditions in the wind, and hoping that someone, casts me or is interested in me. And if they're not, what am I going to do to pay my rent? What am I going to do to continue moving forward with my career? So I think, I think that comes from being an artist and also just being part of our generation. I think that we all watched our parents do the 9-to-5 really specific, that generation was the way they were. And I think, we wanted to go to the city and do different things and get away from the picket fence and, try it a different way. And I think that's why I like our generation. I think we all kind of try to find ways of doing it how we want, not how we're supposed to do it. So that's sort of my perspective on it a little.
Yeah. And Dominique, I'm curious, do you identify with that word and have you sort of put on that scrappy hat during this time or seen others in your field do that in order to keep things moving?
I definitely think that as a fundraiser and then being a millennial fundraiser, I've definitely felt a little scrappy these days. I in the nonprofit world, the word has been pivot because we had to pivot so quickly. Everything was, we're pivoting, we're doing this. And I'm like, great, I'm pivoting and I'm thinking of all these creative ideas constantly and learning new platforms and figuring out how to do things. And then also having to figure out the back end and be able to explain it to the other people who are using it. And I'm yeah, great, let's do that. But it's definitely taking a lot of energy and space in my brain, and thinking through it makes me makes me just feel a lot more scrappier.
This is a question we got a lot from the audience, and I'd love to get a couple of insights. Have there been any like bright spots, or sort of unexpected silver linings that came out of this time? And several of you touched base on that in your videos. Chassity, I know you were one of them. Were there any? Can you elaborate a little bit on some of those silver linings? We can come back, Chassity, if you're having.
For me, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
For me, the silver linings of the work that I do is the clients that I'm able to help, being able to help someone with back rent when they're about to be evicted, and them saying like, oh my God, I didn't know this program existed. I didn't know you were able to help me with this. And also being able to assist people with nutrition. A big philosophy of mine is like, everybody deserves to eat. Food should be free in my mind. And so if any time that I can try to help someone less fortunate who don't know where their next meal is going to come from and make sure they get that, that's the silver lining for me. Also holding other organizations accountable for the work that they say they do, or the funds that they're getting to do that work, but that it's not actually happening. And being able to hold them accountable for that work is the silver lining in it for me. And at the end of the day, it's all about the people who are less fortunate. And I think that that's where I would say my scrappiness come in at, is that I'm gonna fight for my people regardless. So that's the silver lining I took out of it.
Awesome. And Tim, how about you? I remember one specific moment in the interview that Sally ended up on the cutting room floor, was you talking about like actually some of the perks of, not having to schlep out to a gig. Like, can you elaborate a little bit on those silver linings that you had talked about?
Absolutely. For every musician or artist that has to pack a car and then show up 4 to 5 hours early before you go there, and then set your stuff up and deal with things breaking 30 minutes before the show starts and so forth. So some of the things that I don't have to do right now, where I can just literally show up, set up my computer, perform, and still get my rate, is a beautiful thing at times. When I'm really thinking of just like having to go from one thing to another, there would be times where I'd have to hurry up, pack, and then rush to another part of the city for another gig right after, and then get home at 2 a.m. and then maybe even get up early the next day for rehearsal or the next thing. So I think some of the silver lining has been the time, and I think the time and space during COVID is a privilege. Like, there is so many individuals who don't have the luxury of time and the luxury of being able to rest. Some folks just it's not a part of what they have access to. And I think for me, it's been taking a moment to be very, very thankful for what I do have, to be very appreciative of what safety looks like for me and my family and my household, and also having been able to maintain that safety as a musician. I think that growing up, being a musician and an artist, there's some rose-colored glasses of like, oh, I'm gonna, tour, and I'm gonna be on stage, and I'm gonna have the crowd yelling for me. Is gonna be great. And as I've really stepped fully into my identity, there's a lot of lows that come before the highs of performing, that I've been able to take a moment to just acknowledge the work and the journey that I've been on. And some of that rest has actually resulted in more creativity, has resulted in me being able to search for things within myself that are resonating as new and different and unique. And I've been able to work on new music. I've been able to create and kind of stretch my skill sets as a musician, producer, and performer. Pre-COVID, I probably would have been too busy with gigs to be able to give some of the time that I needed to just hone my craft a little more. I think the other component of the silver lining has been learning how to really take a moment to strategize around my business and what are the things that I'm wanting to accomplish over the next 5 to 10 years as a business, as an organization. What are the things that we need to start setting in place? I've been able to get the mentorship and the support that my company has needed to, register our LLC and start to get things trademarked and revamp our website and start to think about the other arms of our organization that we want to develop out, so that we think about sustainability. I think for us, for the longest, because we were kind of hot with, individuals wanting to book us to curate different events. We were like, yo, on to the next contract. And when that immediately stopped, it just required us to take a minute and look into what skill sets, resources, our team members, what they had accessible to them, and kind of continue to build and grow collectively as a team. And allow folks to shine a little more, because we now have a little bit of time and space to get into the creative and development ideation phase of being an artist and a production company to make new work. So that's been really helpful.
Wonderful. And speaking of bright spots, I feel like there is one on the horizon, right, with the vaccine and the rollout. There's still a long way to go, but I do want to touch base a little bit on this. First off, are any of you vaccinated through work? No? And
I just found out this afternoon that I'm not. I was in a clinical trial and I got unblinded and I got the placebo.
Oh no. Well,
Scheduled for the end of the month.
Great. And I'm assuming that's through Berkeley and your work with students, or just?
It's thankfully through the medical system of
Great.
Boston.
That's awesome.
To just get a message saying that I qualified and I'm able to move forward. So
perfect. Well, congrats. And the rest of you, are you excited about that? Are you hopeful and ready for that moment to come to get that email? That's great. I know, there are still parts of the country and communities that really have a distrust for the vaccine because they've been left behind by science in the past, or just don't think that, there's been enough scientific evidence that the vaccine is safe. And, none of us are, experts or researchers or scientists. I know that, but I'm curious of why do you think it's important to educate other millennials specifically about why they should trust science and take this vaccine? I think sometimes the strongest advocacy can come from our peers. And so I just, Matt, where do you see a journalist's role in helping to educate the public, in this frame and to assist in the efficient rollout of the vaccine?
I mean, I think a lot of what journalism is doing is, kind of making clear, the processes, the steps that have gone through to show that the science has been rigorous. There's been really good explanatory journalism about, where these vaccines came from, where the steps in the process there. They're just inherently interesting. And they're also a steady reminder, that we've made incredible progress. I also think, plenty of people are the news is always terrible, but I think it's important to be reminded that we are not near the end of this, and we won't be until we're vaccinated. On the other side, I think, sometimes we saw this especially at the beginning of the pandemic. We saw, every news organization in the country running a story about, these rare instances of side effects, and those sort of things are inevitable, but are not, we should be highlighting that for the most part, this is working. We're doing better at it, and it's the only way out of this. The world, states might reopen and think that through freedom or whatever, they're going to be fine. But the only way we're going to be fine is, when we have group immunization as a group, and that's going to happen through this vaccine.
Yeah, that's great. And Christina, I'm going to jump to you. I know you touched a little bit about it earlier and about how the vaccine is going to play the hugest factor really in getting Broadway and theater in New York back up on its feet. Do you foresee, and again, this is just your opinion, but do you think there's going to come a time that anyone in front of house, backstage, performers, directors, everyone will have to be vaccinated in order to, join a project or be cast in a project? And how do you think that will be handled from an audience perspective? It's a really heavy question, so feel free to pass.
Well, I mean, of course, I have no idea because I'm just the actor on stage. But I think that, I think it will be a large, I think of it more as the bigger picture of what I was saying before is how do you get people back to normal life, back to doing things that, back to getting on a plane and going to New York for a week vacation and going and seeing theater. And, I think about myself, when is the next time I'm going to feel safe and comfortable sitting wedged between two people watching a production of something where, we are singing and spitting and all these things. Like, I mean, when is that going to be? And for me, I think personally, I don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable until I'm vaccinated. And so I think a lot of it is like spreading the rhetoric again that like, this is, like you were saying, Matt, this is our way out. This is the way that we can get back to some semblance of normalcy. And so I think it wouldn't surprise me if that becomes a requirement of getting back to our jobs in the theater, not only to keep ourselves safe, but our backstage crew safe, and of course our audiences safe. So I think it is just something that I assume will be widely, that is something that we all will need at some point. Obviously, that's just my opinion, but I do think it is the key to everything kind of swinging back.
Totally. And Chassity, we talked a lot about the vaccine in our conversation, and you mentioned it as one of your hopes for the coming year to continue to educate the community about the importance of taking the vaccine and getting vaccinated. Why is this work so important in your role, and like how is that education going?
Well, thanks to a grant from the Boston Resiliency Fund, I'm going to start hosting at the end of this month online information sessions for the transgender community. We are already an underserved community. So when COVID hit, we were really not a thought at all. And I just don't want my community to be left behind. Also, stating back what Christina said, a lot of places are going to be requiring a vaccine to enter. So I just don't want us to be left behind. I want us to be educated up front about it. And this is how you can get the vaccine. This is the requirements, and people need to be educated on how to do these things. And I just want to make sure that we're able to do that for them.
Such important work. And Dominique, I'd love to hear your thoughts. YW Boston is focused on creating inclusive space and opportunities for women and people of color, and specifically women of color. And these are communities that have, again, traditionally been left behind in science. And, I'm curious, in your work, like, have you seen that distrust of the vaccine? And is YW Boston, helping with that education? And where does this fit in with your work?
Yeah, so in terms of what I see, I mean, like any other community, there's lots of disparities. There's lots of the biggest thing for women, especially women of color, is the inequity in terms of the rollout. And so that's what's kind of stopping a lot of like, well, why is it so inequitable to get the vaccine? And it's causing this rift between like, should I actually do it? And I'm seeing lots of people having those conversations, and all those conversations aren't going to look the same. So it really does come down to making sure, like the space that Chassity's creating for her community, and making sure that those spaces are happening for all communities, so that people are getting the information that they need, and making sure that people are aware of what they need to do.
To Kayla, from an entrepreneurial perspective, how is the vaccine going to make your work in rebuilding and starting the production work again a reality, and will it impact who you sort of decide to work with?
Well, I think that the main thing that we really need in our creative spaces is to not be thinking constantly about what's going on outside of our creative spaces. That's like the name of the game. It's like, leave it at the door. And so I think what's really hard about shooting right now is, you can be in an emotional scene, and then there's like a camera guy there with a mask on, and you're reminded constantly of what we're going through right now. And so I assume we'll probably be wearing masks for a long time, but I think, at least, obviously I can only speak from my perspective in terms of me getting the vaccine, but part of the reason that I am looking so forward to having it in a work environment is being able to just focus on the creative. God forbid my hand brushes someone's hand. I don't want to run to the bathroom panicking, wash my hands 50 times. Not that I do that. But, I do that. But, just like allowing us to just be free for a second. And I think that hopefully, to me, is even reason enough, aside from education, which is so important, but reason enough for people in creative spaces to be inspired to take the vaccine, just to be able to get to do our work again, and get to do our work for the reason we got into it, which wasn't about late nights and wasn't about, driving to set. It's about the work that we get to do together in a group, which requires vaccination at this point.
Yeah. So, I want to, in the remaining time we have, I want to look to the future, speaking of the vaccine. And, we're getting this question a lot in the Q&A, and I think it's a great place to end. What does the future hold? What do you foresee for millennials specifically, and for your industry as we move out of this? We're years down the line. Do you see long-standing effects? Will you look back on this as the lost year, or do you think that millennials specifically have been able to pivot and really keep the work and the momentum of their lives moving forward? I guess in short, I'm asking, our title of our program tonight is, insinuating that Gen Y maybe won't be okay after COVID. And I want to know from you, do you think millennials will be all right? So Tim, can you start us off?
What a loaded question. Yes, we will be. I think that it is. I put that hope and energy into the world and into my life. I know that I will be okay, and my people will be okay, and I'm hoping and believing that we will be fine. I think the reality is that for some folks, this might have been a lost year. Like we've experienced a lot of loss. There's individuals who have experienced tragedies that are very hard to come back, that we've experienced a lot of trauma as a community, and that because of systemic racism, because of oppression, that is going to massively disenfranchise and kind of continue to separate and have varying impacts on different communities. So I think it's our responsibility to name that truth, in that this has been an incredibly disruptive year. And there's also the other side of individuals have also been able to find beauty in this past year. Individuals have had a lot of beautiful moments and incredible time, whether that's family, friends, career, and inspiration, life change, whatever that has been for folks. Individuals have also experienced those beautiful moments as well. I think we're going to see that continuing to happen. We're going to continue to see loss, and we're also going to see a lot of beauty and hope that happens over this next year. For me, it is kind of the other word that Dominique had brought out was pivot. Like pivoting has been a part of my whole life for this past year and a half, of like just trying to see what we're going to do and respond accordingly. Like what is going to happen within the local scene, what's going to happen at a national level, what relief grants might we need to apply to, what new programming might we need to look into, what new technology is going to help us do this thing that'll allow us to do this thing over here, and then hopefully pay our rent at the end of the month and see how that's going to happen. So I think we're going to continue to pivot and adapt to the new information. I would say that a message for like our generation is that I think, because I would say our generation are the individuals who are probably the ones still doing questionable things in relationship to this vaccine. I'm like, I need folks to sit down. Like I need peeps to take a minute and can we get through can we let this vaccine fully have its effect before we jump the gun and are like out at the beaches or at the clubs, or like I get it, and I think that it's a very important message for our generation, because we're probably, our generation and the generation behind us are probably the ones that are the most active. Our generation, we have a spectrum of folks who have families, who have children, who are going off to school and so forth, and that's an additional touch point. So I think it's an important message for our generation to realize, like, yo, hold tight. We gonna be all right. Sit down, and we'll get through this if we can just control ourselves and find the ways. And for those who don't, or who aren't, unfortunately can't sit down for a minute because they got to work or take care of family or whatever priorities, like, I'm just hoping that individuals are kept safe and are able to make at least the best decisions they can within the scenario that's set up for them.
Great. Matt, anything to add to that? Will the millennials be all right?
I mean, the pandemic wasn't the first game-changing experience that our generation has had. It probably won't be the last. I think the thing we have to think about is like, this has been so disproportionate. So the people of us who are doing well have an obligation to make sure that the people who aren't are lifted up, whether that's, financially through the work that we do. And like, we'll be okay if we take it into our own hands.
I love that. Kayla, how about you?
I was going to go back to that scrappiness idea. I think that the reason we're scrappy is because, like what Matt just said, we've had some changes thrown on us. Even just in terms of the way the digital world changed from when we were born to the way it is now. Even something that small, we've had to pivot in small ways our whole lives. And so I think that our scrappiness as a generation is going to push us through this, because I think, obviously, as we said, like there's such a range of people's experiences during this time, horrific time, and also time for reflection. And I think that being out of it is going to be, regardless of what kind of emotional experience, I think a lot of people are going to have an emotional reaction. And I think what millennials do when we have an emotional reaction is we push and we hustle and we pivot and we figure it out. And so at least that's my hope. That's my optimistic hope for us.
I love that. And Chassity, how about you? Do you see a positive future for our generation?
Definitely. I think that we are the generation that I think we've done the most. I may say so myself. We're not one to be pushed down. We're one to get out there and be scrappy and pivot in ways that we need to ensure that we're moving forward. So I have no doubt in my mind that we will be all right, and that we are going to make sure that the generation that's coming up after us will be okay as well.
I love that. And Dominique, how about you? Are you going to keep the positive train rolling here?
No, yes, I am going to. I think we will be all right. I think as millennials, we've all said this, we're a resilient group. We have really gone through such change. And I just want to echo for sure that like not all of us have had the best year possible, but we still had a year. And that's what's really important here. And the fact that we had a year and we're coming out, and whether we're coming out stronger or feeling like maybe it was a low point and you still came out of it. And that's the beauty of this year. Like you still came out of it and there was a learning experience. And so like to quote the young prophet Kendrick, we gonna be all right. Like we gonna be all right.
I love it. And Christina, bring us home. I hope it's positive. That would be an awkward way to end. Are the millennials gonna be all right?
Absolutely. I mean, I look at this the way that I've looked at my whole life, which is like, even when this thing first started, like, yeah, no, I don't think this has been like the most like incredible, like, well, actually I even say that and I go, I don't know, maybe it was like, maybe I had to sit in some shit that I didn't ever let myself have time to do. I am such a go, go, go. All of us are. I never stop. I just keep going. And that like having to sit back and like reflect on stuff that you usually don't give yourself time to do, I think can be really, insanely helpful for all of us to like have that. And so I'm going to really come away from this. I've had my most down moments and also like really learned a lot about myself and what I want for my life. And I don't want to look at the last year and think it was a lost year. Like what a waste of my life. Like we don't have that much time. So why would I want to do that? I think my favorite quote that I had heard during this time that really helped me at the beginning was, this isn't happening to us, this is happening for us. And why would we not want to take the opportunity to figure out why this is happening instead of like, woe is meing it. So that's been kind of what's been keeping me going this entire time.
I think it's a perfect place to end our conversation tonight. I can't thank the six of you enough, as well as Hannah Watson, for sharing. You all were so open and just really transparent, and that means a lot to us, and I know our audience as well. You are also inspiring with the work you do, and we can't wait to continue to see how you all shape the world post-COVID. And hopefully we can get you all here at the museum as soon as it's safe, and we'll do this again, maybe like 2 years from now. Where are we at now? And we'll be able to answer that question, and I'm sure it'll be just as positive as all of you have said. So thank you all again. I need to thank our friends at the Lowell Institute for making tonight possible. And I also want to thank all of you out there for watching and spending your Wednesday night with us. We hope you will continue to do so all season long. And I'm actually going to leave you plugging our next event. I hope you can join us next Thursday night, March 18th, for a night of mindfulness meditation. We'll be doing a deep dive into the science behind mindfulness, as well as a guided meditation practice inspired by water. So sign up for that. As you exit the virtual theater tonight, a slide will come up with information of where you can sign up. We hope to see you all. Thank you all again. Stay safe, stay well. Have a wonderful night. Thank you.